Hello and welcome to European UFOs. I'm your host Sebastian, and if you like this episode, please leave a review on your chosen platform. It really helps with the algorithm. Also, if you do want to support me in keeping this podcast ad-free, then please go to buymeacoffee.com. There, for less than the price of a coffee, you can really help me keep the show up and running ad-free. Today, the notion of UFOs flying in our skies is not too outlandish for most people. Accepting that people get abducted by the occupants of those craft, however, is a different story. Ever since the Betty and Barney Hill story broke in 1965, UFO abductions have become a recurrent but rather problematic part of ufology. In essence, the problem boils down to two factors. First, a lot of UFO abductions defy our sense of reality. People who get abducted not only report missing time, but often claim to have been beamed through walls and moved through space in a way that we just don't understand. Second, much, if not all, the evidence comes in the form of eyewitness testimony. As we've heard in earlier episodes, this comes with its own set of problems. Regardless of these caveats, the study of the abduction phenomenon is, to my mind, a worthwhile pursuit because even if it doesn't provide clear-cut evidence of alien interference in human affairs, it at least points to a very curious psychological phenomenon. Here, with me to discuss UFO abductions from a psychological perspective, is Hélène Lansley, a clinical psychologist and a Ph.D. student at the University of Lorraine, France, at the INTERPSI laboratory. For her PhD, she is developing an analysis of UAP and alien abductions. Since 2017, she has worked as a counselor for CIRCEE, which stands for Center for Information, Research and Consultation on Exceptional Experiences, where she supports people who report having paranormal experiences. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do want to get in touch, then please do so. Links are in the description. But for now, sit back, relax, and get ready for new insights into the abduction enigma. Hi, Helen. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. Thank you so much for having me today, Sebastian.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Today we're going to talk about a topic which, to be honest, I've deliberately stayed away from a bit in this podcast due to its often very bizarre nature, namely the topic of alien abductions, UFO abductions, whatever you want to call them. And in your professional capacity as a clinical psychologist, I'm really looking forward today to picking your brains on how you deal with this issue, both from a therapeutic point of view, but also from a research point of view, because you're obviously also doing serious academic work on this in the context of your PhD. So this kind of leads me to my first question. How, as a clinical psychologist, did you actually get interested in this very complex topic?
Well, to really understand, I think I have to go back a bit to my teenage years. As a young teenager, like quite a lot of them actually, I was already interested in what globally is called the paranormal. I had a little group of friends with which I could try and call spirits or look a bit at the sky and see if we could find something a bit strange. And then one day I did suffer as a teenager from sleep paralysis. So I don't know if we'll have the occasion to talk about that topic bit, which is a bit related to exceptional experiences. And at that time I got really scared from those episodes. And I was finally helped by my physician, my doctor, who explained to me what was happening, because sleep paralysis has a biological, physiological root, nature. So then I stopped having those kinds of episodes, and later on I actually started by becoming a horse riding instructor, which I did for a few years, and then finally decided that I wanted to use my brain a bit more, even though I loved my job, and went back to studying psychology. I was lucky enough to be in the University of Nantes in France, in which we, as soon as the first year, we had professors who taught us anomalous psychology. And I also read very interesting books, especially one called Folie et Paranormal, that you would translate to Madness and the Paranormal, which was written by Dr. Renaud Evrard, who really led me to want to study exceptional experiences, paranormal experiences, and maybe help people who go through these experiences and can be scared or traumatized by them. Then when I started my master's degree, that's when I went more into the extraterrestrial and UFO studies. And so my two master's degree, little thesis, mémoire, do you say in English? I don't know, were already on UFOs. And then I went to abductions for my PhD.
Excellent. When you had this terrifying experience with sleep paralysis, so fortunately I've never had this this condition, but for what I've read about it, it must be absolutely shocking. So, in your case, do you remember seeing anything that would be akin to an abduction scenario, or was it completely different for you when you had those experiences?
Nothing to do with aliens or abductions. I did have hallucinations at the beginning, but nothing to do with alien encounters.
And so kind of hallucinations of strange figures kind of moving in your room, something that would go in that direction, or is it really difficult to pinpoint?
I actually often had a disfigured little girl sitting on my chest, which was really,
That's indeed
really,
quite scary. Yeah.
Which was really a bad experience at the time. But as soon as I was able to talk about it to my physician at the time, he explained to me what it was, and I kept having sleep paralysis after then, but the hallucinations stopped immediately, and it's often the case for people who have these type of experiences, which are quite common actually.
Indeed, but it's very interesting, and I think we're going to talk about it later. Because for you, then I suppose there was this kind of interpretive shift from seeing it as something that's ontologically difficult to make sense of, as to something that can actually be embedded to our framework of reality through that therapeutic approach. So you were kind of counseled, and then saw, well, interestingly enough, this is probably just a medical condition. But so I find that transformation quite interesting, because I think the other dimension of it is, if you go down the other path, is that people don't think there is a therapeutic or a medical kind of condition underlying this, but it's actually a reality that is happening to them. And it's probably quite difficult to differentiate these two interpretations on a personal level. But so then let's zoom forward a bit. So take us through your current work with the abduction phenomenon. You already said that this was a topic then at university in your master's degree, and now also in the context of your PhD research. So what exactly are you doing or trying to find out?
Well, I on the one part, I am doing research for my PhD. That is actually what I'd call a clinical analysis of narratives and subjects who describe UFO sightings, alien encounters, up to abduction. And on the other hand, I'm also a clinical psychologist for a center called CIRCEE, which is the Center for Information, Research and Communication on Exceptional Experiences, in which we have developed a counseling service in which we offer support or psychotherapy for people who want to talk about their exceptional experiences or sometimes seek help.
And did these two areas of your work, so on the one hand your work as a clinical psychologist and then as a PhD researcher, they inform one another, or are they kind of each in their own field and then you do one and then you do the other?
No, they're absolutely connected. Yeah.
Okay. And so the institutional framework in which you're embedded, you already mentioned this institution, CIRCEE, I'm probably butchering the name, but sorry. And so this then is, just to understand this is an academic institution that is devoted to the counseling, but also study of people who have anomalous experiences. Is that a fair summary? Or
absolutely, the CIRCEE really has the two goals. On the one side, the counseling service, and on the other side, academic and scientific research on exceptional experiences.
And do you have any, because I know that in France, the study of UAP is a bit more institutionalized, fortunately, than in other countries. So do you also have touch points with, I think they're called GAPAN, right?
Yes. Yes, I've been collaborating with them, with one of my PhD supervisors since 2017 now. So to get a better understanding, in France we have what we call the CNES, which is the National Center for Space Studies, in which there is a special unit called the GEPAN for Group of Studies and Information on Unidentified Aerospace Phenomena. And so they collect all kinds of testimonies. We can talk about testimonies and not narratives in the field of the GEPAN, of people who directly contact them or who go to the police to report a UFO sighting.
How many of the individuals that approach you or your colleagues, of all the people who've had anomalous experiences, actually claim to have been abducted by non-human entities?
Abductions is really a very small percent. We'd be about 3% of people who contact CIRCEE report abductions. UFO sightings are a bit more common, with about 5-7% of our contacts.
Do UFO sightings from the data set you're dealing with also entail other paranormal aspects, or is it just that people feel compelled to share this, but then just move on with their lives? Or is there something more profound than just seeing a UFO?
I think that I think there are a lot of UFO sightings that happen every day. It's quite an interesting exceptional experiences among exceptional experiences, because unless you're unless you're an expert in the field of what happens in the sky, I think it's quite easy just to look up and to see something go through and not exactly knowing what it is. You may, of course, recognize a star, the sun, the moon, maybe a few planets, but well, some things that go through the sky, maybe a satellite or Starlinks, and a lot of things that are less common. So some people just see something that is unknown in the sky, can't really say it's an exceptional experience. The interpretation is very important, and of course sometimes the sighting is so strange that it is obviously an exceptional experience. I think that's why we have a bit less of UFO sightings than other kinds of exceptional experiences that come to us.
Indeed. So someone approaches you with an abduction narrative, or let's call it testimony. What does that, based on your experience, look like for the most part? So is there a typical case, without going into specific case studies, but just what is the kind of overall framework of such a narrative?
Yeah, well, what's a bit of a paradox is that the thing that almost always repeats itself in abduction narratives is that there are missing times. Missing times is the word that was used by Mack and Fuller to describe the fact that the narrative is not on a continuum, but the people have gaps and blackouts during their experience. That's actually why they tried to study patients under hypnosis to try and fill in these gaps. So that's still, well, that's common in my experience with abduction experiences. There is very often the beginning of the experience, which starts with very bright light, which is white or blue most of the time, that wakes them up in their bed or in their car if they're driving. And then very often, once they are on board the alien spaceship, which they have seen or not, that depends, before the abduction, they often remember being on a cold metal table on which they often undergo very painful medical experiments from the alien beings.
So it's interesting to hear this from you, who's done really recent research on this, because it's very consistent with what, all the big luminaries in the field like Hopkins and John Mack have already written, like some 30 years ago almost, or even longer ago. And so it's interesting to see this red line kind of going through all these accounts. I'm wondering, from your position as a clinical psychologist, is when someone approaches you with a narrative like this, testimony like this, what is your first step? Because I think it's really important for the audience to understand what kind of I don't want to use the word filter criteria at work here, but obviously you need some sort of kind of, I suppose, psychological testering or buffering system to eliminate, or I don't even know, I don't want to use that word, but what I'm getting at is people who suffer from serious trauma, like sexual abuse and so on, and this might just be a symptom. So I suppose that, as in from a therapeutic point of view, it doesn't really matter because you want to help people. But I guess if you look at the underlying specificity of the alien abduction phenomenon, it does bear a certain relevance, namely the question, well, why do these people who have this trauma claim to have been abducted by non-human entities? So to come back to this was a long-winded way of asking you, what do you do with people when they approach you as a standard kind of battery of psychological assessment?
Well, the first thing that we like to know is, why has the person contacted us? What are they seeking? Some people just want a non-judgmental space where they can just talk about their experience, well, their abduction experience, and not much else, actually, just to be able to talk about it to somebody who's not going to call them crazy, or who's not going to be completely overwhelmed or fascinated by the topic. And Sometimes they are looking for psychological help, mostly if they have symptoms that approach the ones from PTSD. And then to come back a bit to your question, which was going a bit wide, we do tend to try very rapidly from the start to not offer our help to people who are suffering from psychiatric disorders and mostly psychosis. Not because we don't want to, and not because we think that people who suffer from psychosis can't have exceptional experiences. Of course they can. But if they are in a phase in which they are, really suffering from the disorder, we can't help them as much as we would want to, and we often try to get them to have a more medical checkup to help them. And in regards to trauma, yes, we can go a bit more onto that topic. There really often is trauma, mostly in childhood, and sometimes just in the year before the alien abduction. It happens very often, not all the time, but very often.
Yeah, perhaps we can get into the trauma issue a bit further on in our discussion, because I think a lot of discussions around alien abductions really hinge on this. I think it's such an important topic, trauma in all of this. But let's get back to when someone approaches you initially. What kind of Is it possible to have a general profile of the individuals who approach you? Are they kind of, I don't know, socioeconomically speaking, middle class? Do they have a certain religious persuasion, etc.?
It can be anybody, really. All age, all genders, and all categories.
And how do they rank on, I don't know, standard psychological tests concerning creativity, memory, etc.? Is that something you control for, or?
Oh, that's actually a very interesting question in my PhD, because for most exceptional experiences, we often meet people who have what we call a fantasy-prone personality. So as you were just mentioning, they have very high score in creativity, imagination, people who have a really good connection with their own emotions, emotional life. They often like being in contact with other people, are very helpful. And in UFO and alien abduction experiences, we don't have as many, and we have found that quite a lot of people with these experiences have a very different psychological functioning, and so that is one of my big work, my big pieces of work in my thesis.
Oh, that's really fascinating, because in preparation of this, I've just been rereading a bit of Susan Clancy's stuff from earlier on, and I think she basically expounded on the theory that these are people. I mean, I think she also did some research on it, obviously, but that these are people who are very fantasy prone in kind of who get abducted by aliens. So very interesting to see what's going to come out of your research there. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. In some of the people that I counsel have the particularity of speaking in a very emotionally detached way, at least at the beginning of their experiences, and yeah, so that was very different from the fantasy-prone personalities we are used to.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into this issue of trauma, and I think the way I would like to approach it is the very direct question. So if, let's say, the hypothesis is that 90% of all UFO abductions are due to some sort of trauma. Let's take the typical one, childhood trauma. How then does one account for the very specificity of abduction experiences? I mean, to begin with, you said there is this phenomenon of missing time. There is the phenomenon of being subjected to medical experiences on a cold metal-like table. So I'd be interested to hear how the specific links are created from a very kind of generalized trauma source to this very specific narrative, what mechanisms would be at play if one were to kind of support that hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. Well, to try and be clear, to understand the emergence of these kind of experiences, we do rely on the hypothesis of the paranormal solution, which was studied by Professor Thomas Rabeyron, and where exceptional experiences are considered as a specific reaction to traumas and negative life events. I do have to underline that it's not the case for all exceptional experiences. It does help to understand a vast majority of them, but not everybody has a trauma before having an exceptional experiences. And with that hypothesis, we can understand alien abductions or other kinds of experiences as a non-pathological defense mechanism that allows the person to cope and to keep control over negative and traumatic life events. I have a very good example. I had interviews with a young man in his late 20s who described a very classic abduction experience with gray aliens who still come up quite often. So the grays are they can be small, but in his particular case, they were about 5'9", big gray human type aliens with big black eyes, who had him on a cold table, and who tried to test him. They made different experiments, mostly on his genital parts, and then he woke up from this abduction. He was back in his bed, and that young man had actually a few days before his abduction been raped by 4 men, and he hadn't realized, and it came up during psychotherapy, that one of the men that were in the rape he suffered from had physical features that were exactly the same as one of the alien beings that he had during his abduction encounter.
Yes, so I think this is a really good example of the direct relationship. I mean, it couldn't be any better. I mean, obviously, it's horrible what happened to that individual, but from a scientific point of view, I think there you have a 100% match between the event and the outcome in terms of that alien abduction narrative. But just to get a better understanding of this, so not all individuals who approach you with an alien abduction testimony have traumatic experiences. Is that correct? So what's the kind of quantitative relationship between those where you can clearly say they have a traumatic experience that might account for it, or there are people where you just can't detect anything?
Well, more than 90% there is a traumatic background.
And interesting. And it wouldn't be So the thing is, what I was wondering, I'm very undecided on the topic. See, that's why I also haven't really covered it in this podcast so far, because I don't really know what to make of it. But I mean the event itself of being abducted by having the experience of being abducted by something that's totally beyond your understanding already is kind of a traumatic experience. So for me, it's a bit this hen and egg question. So where does the trauma come from? Does it actually come from the alien abduction experience, or is that just a symptom, as you said, a coping mechanism according to that model, that then kind of mitigates a previous trauma? So is there any analytical way of distinguishing between these two? Because in the case study you just gave, to me, it almost seems that this wasn't, because the time lapse between the two was very short. They were almost identical, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that particular case is just a very good example of the model of the paranormal solution. Most of the time, it's much more complicated to be able to create to be able to make a direct link, a direct connection between a traumatic event or traumatic events that occurred during childhood and then an alien abduction. We also in CIRCEE all stand, and it's very important to us to have a non-judgmental point of view. As I said, for 90% of the people that I interview or who undergo psychotherapy with me, yes, there is a traumatic background. Sometimes we are able, with our patients, to connect the exceptional experiences to the traumatic experiences, to help them psychologically digest them. That's the term we use in clinical psychology, so that they have a better quality of life. But I can't today prove that alien abduction exists, and I can't say that they don't. I don't have the proof that nobody has ever been taken aboard an alien ship.
I think that's a very good position to adopt. And coming back to Susan Clancy, I think she was a bit dogmatic in her, argument that, hey, all of this is just phenomenon of the human psyche. So I think that very refreshing, and both from a kind of interpretive point of view, or epistemological point of view, but also, as you said, as a kind of therapeutic necessity, that you want to have this position of being undecided, or at least able to kind of non-judgmental. So I think that's very important. Another feature that I think 100% pops up in any, abduction book is the role of hypnotherapy. What's your take on that?
Oh, well, hypnotherapy or hypnosis still exists in abduction therapy, if I may call it that way. I know that in France there is a group who still uses it. Often, their aim is to do what we call regression hypnosis, to try and put the person back into the vivid memory of the experience, so that they can have a full narrative of it. I am not an expert in hypnosis, but I do know that hypnosis cannot work without another people giving clues and helping the person to guide them along the narrative. So I do tend to believe that hypnosis could bring false memories, and not really give the real narrative of the experience, and kind of just fill in the blanks in the gaps of the missing times. So I don't use hypnosis. I don't think it's the best tool to help the patients or to get the best narratives. We rather use techniques that come from microphenomenology, in which we do also try to put the person in a specific state of mind, but without changing, without putting them under hypnosis or anything like that. But we just try to help them talk about their experiences using the present time. So it helps them go back to the experience and describe it a bit like they would do for a movie or a dream.
Yeah, and I mean, if you listen to some of the interview tapes, I think a lot of them are online from Bud Hopkins. I mean, it's terrifying, you know. I mean, not that I believe in the ontological reality of it necessarily, but what these people went through by being in under hypnosis is absolutely terrifying. He's screaming, crying. So I always wondered if that if that has to be the best approach that we have in our therapeutic toolkit, because obviously these people are suffering quite a bit. So.
Well, I hope that the therapists who put them under hypnosis do explain that it can be quite traumatic, and that they are going to go through the same kind of experience that they have had again. And I also hope that they get help afterwards, and that they are not just left to go back home under the session after the session.
How do you make sense of the consistency in these stories? So the narrative consistency, because as you initially pointed out, there is a certain narrative flow to this and a build up, and then the cataclysm of kind of being on the spaceship and subjected to various medical experiments. So I always wondered if this is due to trauma, which as someone who's not skilled or psychologically, for me, is something very personal with different manifestations. How does the narrative consistency emerge? Different people telling the same thing. What's the source of that?
I think that there's a real impact of the culture and the society. Exceptional abductions, but we use the term abductions now to speak specifically about aliens, but maybe you could use kidnapping, or being taken out of your known world to go up in the sky and go to sometimes a different world or a spaceship, is something that people have been describing since ancient times, since antiquity. We have those. In the Middle Ages, people said that they were taken up in the sky by witches. So the experiences have always happened. I think that our Western societies today find it use the interpretation of alien abductions. Maybe it has always been aliens. I don't know, but I think that the culture does have a very big part of importance in the interpretation of the experience.
I think that's a very fair and accurate point. I mean, if you look at the Northern European fairy lore, it's the same, kind of little people abducting humans and leading them into their arcane world. It's very fascinating stuff, and has many resemblances to the UFO phenomenon, especially this element of abduction, of being unwillingly taken to a place that exists alongside, but also outside our reality. So that's very fascinating. What do you make, though, because this question always comes up, and I've heard various theories. Obviously, it all started with Betty and Barney Hill on their road trip, and I think the very common argument is that, well, back then there wasn't a lot of media around, and in fact, not many UFO documentaries, films, whatever. So how could they have had this very visceral, lively experience of being abducted by aliens, which hitherto had never really been a thing in that particular manifestation, at least?
Well, actually, for the Hill experience, they did remember afterwards that they had watched a science fiction movie just a few days before being abducted. I think it's a bit easy to just say that they had the abduction because they watched a movie. I don't think that can happen because, well, they would be much more abductions if just watching a movie could make you have these kind of experiences. I think that, well, at the beginning, the Hills, they really had only a big missing time. They didn't understand how it was possible that a car trip that was supposed to be about 30 minutes, if I remember, took more than a couple of hours. And so that's why they started having questions. They had a UFO sighting, but they only remembered the alien abduction and the alien encounter under hypnosis. So there was a bit of reconstruction there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think in terms of what actually may have happened, the abduction, it may have happened, it may have not happened, who knows. But I think it's fairly certain to say that they had the experience of missing time, because this is something that really occurred to them. And they also saw a weird light in the sky, and he got his binoculars out and probably had a good old look at it. So I think this is most likely what happened in our kind of plane of reality, so to speak. But whatever happened after or before then is, I think, kind of hard to tell. What do you make of the kind of American take on UFO abductions? It seems that, and I'm just really interested in this because we're both European. You work on this clinically and academically. And I think in the US, at least from my point of view, I think there was this kind of big focus on this topic in the 70s, then in the 90s again with John Mack. And now it's become this kind of quasi-religious movement almost, with experiences, which is an interesting term. They used to be abductees and now they're experiences. What's your take on all of this, on the developments in the US, if you're following them at all?
Yes, of course, I have to. The US have an enormous amount of people who claim to have been abducted, much more than what we have here in Europe. Maybe because it's easier for them to talk about it. They have more groups, therapeutic groups, so maybe they feel a bit more free to talk about it. I think that what UFO researchers called the disclosure has been really important in the last few years, with the Pentagon disclosing the few videos of UAP. I use the term UAP here because UFO is so commonly directly linked to aliens, whereas UAP is something unknown in the sky, no interpretation behind it. But of course, people who believe in aliens and will want to see alien spacecrafts or alien intelligence anyway behind these UAPs. So I think that in the US people have been maybe a bit more intrigued by what the government might have been hiding to them, and so they are trying to understand what lies behind these experiences.
So, with what's going on in the US, various whistleblowers coming forward or are in line of coming forward, most notably, the entire Grush drama that unfolded last year. How does that change your work, the work of your colleagues? What impact does it have on the position of undecidability and neutrality? And when doing your work, does it make you lean more towards a certain conclusion than the other? Or what's your take?
Well, no. Well, firstly, because we are in France, and so we don't have as many. Well, we don't have yet to really decide if we want to say that there is a reality behind these experiences. And I'm very glad I don't have to choose, because I don't want to. I don't have enough facts to conclude. But we do have more and more people who contact us or who contact the GEPAN, who are certain of their experiences and of the nature of their experiences, since these videos and other documents who have been released in the US.
Is there anything, we've talked a little about consistency in these stories, is there anything that you would say is particularly French?
Are there typical French abductions? I don't think so. I have read a lot of abduction narratives. I have read a lot of John Mack, even though I don't really agree with his last conclusions at the end of his career. I do think he has an incredible collection of abduction testimonies and narratives, and I don't think the French are very different.
That's interesting. So it might also be because we're living in a very connected and globalized world, so that these cultural ideas to a certain degree get traded cross border. So that does make a lot of sense. What is your outlook on the field? Because I think we need probably, on your work, because we probably need to put it a bit into perspective there. I would hazard the guess that there aren't many psychologists dealing with these sorts of issues, right? So there's probably it's not a huge field in psychology. Do you think that's going to change at some point, or?
I think it's already changing, actually. Yes. I only know 2 universities in France, maybe 3, who really have a department which is dedicated to the study of exceptional experiences. CIRCEE was founded in 2012. And the people contacting us to talk about their exceptional experiences is widely growing. And also, and more interesting, I think, we have more and more psychologists or medical doctors who contact us because they want to be trained and to help people, because they are meeting patients who talk about exceptional experiences, and what is good is that people are, professionals are stopping to immediately put a psychiatric diagnosis on exceptional experiences, and want to help them. So I do think that in the following years we will talk about exceptional experiences more widely and with a more open mind.
Yeah, that's interesting and also good to hear, because I think it's been missing for these sorts of individuals who do have, as we talked about, very traumatic experiences, but probably don't have anyone to turn to. So that's good to hear. You also just mentioned other medical professionals. I mean, are there other parameters by which these individuals could be studied? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, apart from the psychological consequences of having these experiences, is there also physiological traces? I don't want to use the word implant and so on, but is there anything into, not to belittle it, but is there anything in terms of bodily functions also, as far as you know, that's been impacted by this, like heart rate, whatever?
Well, I understand why you're hesitant, but you do have to use those terms because those are the ones that are related to the whole UFO field. Yes, we do talk about implants, and we do try to work with physicians in which we trust. When people say that they have had implants, they feel them, or other types of physical changes. I remember, for example, having had one patient who claims to have been tattooed by the aliens, and he did have a skin biopsy in our research, and the other one that is often mentioned more by women, of course, is the fact that they thought they were pregnant and the fetus was taken out of their womb by aliens. It's a bit more difficult to study, but there have been some cases of a physician talking about a miscarriage, but without the patient remembering to have lost blood or anything that could make her feel that she had miscarried. So yeah.
All right. And with that skin biopsy, were the results conclusive in any direction, or?
Well, the biopsy said that it was ink. It was tattoo ink. So it's just after, between me and my patient and how we worked after that, I am sure he wasn't lying when he said that he doesn't remember getting these marks by his choice. Does it mean that he was tattooed by an alien? I don't know. It was ink. It was normal tattoo ink. But we had to work with that.
No, it's fascinating. And you had no recollection of how that may have happened. So it's. I mean, I'm just trying to kind of, from a kind of normal everyday perspective, it's really hard to make sense of these issues because, I just imagine him going into a tattoo parlor, getting a tattoo, and then like a week later, like, oh, what's this? But yeah.
Yes, well, but what's interesting is that I don't think that people contact CIRCEE scam. Because, well, they have to pay to get psychotherapy. I of course can't reveal their case to the media, to television, so they can't get fame from their story. And so we had, I've been working for CIRCEE since 2017. I had one scam, one person who just was trying to make me waste a bit of my time and wanted to do a prank, I think. But the exceptional experience was so huge and enormous that it immediately was well debunked. So I really think that that person may have gone to a tattoo parlor, maybe in another state of mind, maybe using drugs, maybe just in a kind of dissociation of the mind, went to a tattoo parlor, or maybe there's something much more strange behind these little dots that he has on the skin.
Interesting. So to wrap this up, Helen, if you were to walk on the street and see someone who was abducted by aliens and you had a conversation with him, you would probably not notice any sort of aberrant behavior, right? These are just normal individuals going about their daily lives, but they have these exceptional experiences. Is that a fair summary if the general population has these sorts of experiences?
Absolutely. It can be anybody. Most of the people I talk to have families, work, have friends, hobbies. So it can really be anybody. You wouldn't know if they didn't tell you.
Well, hopefully that is going to change through the good work that you do, because I think we all live in a world that's cruel enough as it is, so we should all be nicer to each other and more accepting. So I think that is very important. Excellent. So where can people find more about your work, the work of the institute you work for? So a particular website, publications that we can check out?
Absolutely. Well, we do have an internet site which is called CIRCEE. So that is CIRCEE.org or ORG. For the moment, the website is only in French. So to help you a bit more get info about UAP, you can go to the website of the GEPAN, which has made the effort to have an English version. Where you can find very interesting testimonies, short ones, of course, and because they do respect the privacy of the people who contact them, but you also have quite a few statistics that can be really interesting. My two PhD supervisors, Professor Thomas Rabéron and Dr. Renaud Évrard, also have websites and often publish very interesting articles in English about exceptional experiences and abductions. And in English, I published last year a chapter in a book called The Reliability of UFO Witnesses. So you can also find my own work and in that chapter.
Perfect. And now the favorite question of any PhD student: when is it done and where can we find it then?
You're talking about my chapter or my thesis?
No, your thesis, your PhD.
My thesis. I hope it will be wrapped by the end of this year, 2024. I hope so. Maybe beginning of 2025, we'll see. The important is to have a really good thesis. So I'm taking my time. And you'll have to be a bit patient to be able to read it because of the collaboration with the Japon. I won't be able to release it as such, but I do hope to write a book afterwards.
I think that would be really helpful to have a book from a European perspective on this global phenomenon. And thanks a lot, Helen. It was lovely to have you on today, and I think it was very refreshing to talk in such a serious but also light manner about a topic that is very complex. So thanks a lot.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye. Thanks.